The rain keeps pouring down, non-stop for days now. The outside world is wet and sticky, and even indoors feels heavy with the humidity. Inside, two people are close, getting intimate, and their voices are soft and heated, the tension in the air matching the intensity of the storm outside. As they move together, they talk to each other in between moments. Meanwhile, the female lead gazes out the window at the dark sky, watching the rain fall relentlessly. It's been nearly 6 years, 5 years and 10 months to be exact, since she was locked away. Finally, she's out. After so long, she's standing outside, feeling the coolness of the rain soaking through her clothes. No umbrella, no excitement. Freedom doesn't feel as sweet as she imagined. It's just damp. Her clothes cling to her as she steps in a puddle, water splashing all around. There's no rush to go anywhere. She just walks, lost in thought. Then, she pulls out a piece of paper. It's a little crumpled, but she can still read the address on it clearly. She looks at it, sighs, and then starts heading toward it. She needs to go there now. She doesn't have anywhere else to go. When she arrives, she's already soaked to the bone, but she finds an umbrella waiting for her. Someone had seen her drenched and kindly handed it over. As she takes the umbrella, she remembers her last conversation with Minyoung, her old cellmate. Minyoung had a longer sentence, so she wasn't getting out anytime soon. But she'd heard about the situation with our girl, how she had no place to go after being released, and offered to help. That's how she ended up at Minyoung's place. The umbrella feels like a small kindness, but it's enough to make her realize something. As she walks into the warmth of Minyoung's home, she remembers what Minyoung and the person who gave her the umbrella said. There are still people in this world who care about others, who offer help without asking for anything in return. That thought lingers with her as she steps inside, finally finding a place to rest. The building Minyoung lives in smells musty, just like the prison. Our girl can't seem to escape that smell. She walks around a little, trying to find the right floor where Minyoung's room is. It's room 102, but it's actually in the basement of the building. She goes downstairs and there it is, right at the bottom of the stairs. The door's all the way inside. She punches in the key code, opens the door, and steps in. It looks pretty basic, kind of like what you'd expect from a basement room, but it's really dusty. You can tell it's been empty for a while, probably more than 6 months. She slides open the window to get some fresh air, then plops down on the couch, feeling super tired. Her eyes shut, and she falls asleep almost immediately, sinking into deep, sweet slumber. One name keeps popping into her mind, Seo. She remembers the young girl, so cheerful, always smiling. Seo had said it was raining outside and asked if her Unnie wanted to go see the ocean with her. Suddenly, the memory shifts. It's Seo again, but this time she's not smiling. The cheerful girl is lying unconscious in a pool of blood. What happened? It's unclear. Our girl is panicking, calling out for Seo. She's holding a knife, crying and screaming, shouting that Seo is going to die. She wakes up with a start, still crying, her face wet with tears. She looks around and realizes it's nighttime now. She must have fallen asleep on the couch after coming here. There's a noise and she tenses up, her face full of worry. Someone's here. A tall figure appears at the door. It's a man. She doesn't hesitate to ask, "Who are you? How did you get in?" In that moment, she wonders if this is the man Minyoung warned her about. Back at prison, Minyoung told Seo to be careful, because there's a weirdo living next door. He's a creepy guy who kept bothering Minyoung, always trying to get her to sleep with him before she was sent to prison. Minyoung had warned her that getting involved with someone like him wouldn't end well for Seo. The man walks right up to her, and with an intense voice, she asks him what he wants. He just smirks and ignores her question completely. Instead, he tells her she's really pretty, pulls out his lighter and lights it. He asks her why she left the door open. He thinks it's dangerous. He takes a puff of his cigarette and looks her right in the eye, waiting for her to answer. She doesn't respond immediately, just staring at the cigarette. She's a bit distracted, almost in a daze, wondering how long it's been since she had a cigarette herself. All of a sudden, she really feels the urge to smoke one. She asks him for one, and he just smiles, calling her pretty girl again. He holds out the cigar to her, but then he says something even stranger. He asks if she'd like to suck on something else instead. It's nasty talk for someone she just met, and Seoh wonders who this guy even is. Where is this going to lead? The young man looks at her with a grin, waiting for her reply. Seoh's eyes sparkle in the dim light, and she thinks to herself that he must think she's naive or something, probably teasing her. After a moment, she finally speaks up and says yes to his question. His smile widens, and he takes a puff of his cigarette. Seoh finds it strange, though, because the cigarette has this oddly refreshing scent. It's definitely not the usual cigarette smell. She notices it's different, and for a moment, she wonders if the fresh scent is coming from his hand. Just as she's about to take the cigarette from him, he yanks it away quickly. Seoh's face falls, and she asks angrily what exactly he thinks he's doing. He leans in closer and asks her if she thinks it'll be that easy, as if there won't be some kind of payment for it. Just like Minyoung said, this guy really is light-hearted. Seoh is sharp, and she can tell he's been getting more and more worked up since he walked in. His bulge in his pants is getting pretty noticeable, and it's clear his intentions are anything but pure. It's obvious what he wants when he barges into a woman's home in the middle of the night with no real reason. Seoh has heard a lot about him from Minyoung, but something about him feels off. The one thing that stands out, though, is that he's actually pretty handsome. She might be forgetting, though, that he's also known for being a bit of a womanizer. Seoh sits up, clearly frustrated, but also determined. She tells him she'll pay him back double, but then quickly takes it back, and says she'll pay him 3 times as much. The young man seems to like where this is going, and he agrees, but says she'll have to increase the offer even more. Seoh gets really angry now, and she snaps at him, asking if he's trying to scam her. She wants to know just how much he plans to take from her. He just smiles, unfazed, and says that he's got to make a living somehow. Seoh isn't having it, though, and she snaps at him again, saying he's Choi Minyoung's lover, and that she's Minyoung's good friend. She asks him if he can't even do this little favor for his lover's friend. As soon as she says this, his smile fades, and his whole expression changes. He stretches out the cigarette he's been smoking, but Seoh doesn't want it. She thinks it's petty of him to offer her that one, especially when he could just give her a new one. Seoh takes the cigarette from him and takes a puff, feeling a moment of calm wash over her. He watches her and comments that she's smoking it like it's really good. Seoh shrugs and tells him it is delicious. The young man grabs the cigarette from her hand and takes a puff himself, still staring at her. Then, he starts to turn around to leave, but Seoh asks for another cigarette. He tells her it's the last one he has. Seoh isn't sure if he's serious, so she asks again if it's really the last one. He squats down in front of her, and says he's made a big decision tonight. Seoh thanks him for the cigarette, and he says it was rewarding to see her enjoying it so much. He rubs his lips with the back of his hand and gives her a look that seems to say more than he means to. He asks if she's interested in some help. Seoh, surprised by the question, looks at him and asks if he thinks she's just that easy. He's taken aback by her response for a moment, and then he gets up and pulls a pack of cigarettes from his back pocket. He'd lied about running out of cigarettes. He offers her a trade instead. Seoh suddenly remembers what Minyoung had told her about this guy. Minyoung had warned her about him, telling her if he ever became a problem, she should just kick him in the nuts. Wild advice, right? But Seo figures he's probably just a light-hearted guy, and not really someone to be afraid of. Seo stands up and turns down his offer. The young man says it's a shame and tells her he's on his way out. Before leaving, he says a few things to her. He tells Seo to keep the door open if she ever wants to smoke again. She asks him why he thinks she should do that, and he just says it's nice if neighbors get along well. He calls her pretty girl one more time and adds that he's older than Choi Minyoung, her cellmate. Seo asks if he's indirectly asking her to show him more respect or use honorifics when talking to him. He says that's not what he means, he just wants her to know, and whether she respects him or not is up to her. He waves goodbye and says she pretty much took advantage of him tonight, but is fine with it. Seo thinks he's not that bad. But deep down, she knows he's probably just as bad as Minyoung said. The next morning, Seo wakes up to a knock at the door. She wonders who could be knocking and what they want so early. She opens the door, but no one's there. Instead, she finds a pack of cigarettes and a lighter on the floor. It's a strange situation. It's pretty clear that the guy from next door must have left it. Based on what she's heard about him and their little encounter last night, he seems like the kind of guy who'd leave her cigarettes. Seo doesn't think he's such a bad guy, though. It seems like he really does want to help out as neighbors. She lights up a cigarette, feeling a little weak since she hasn't had any food yet. But the pleasure of smoking makes her feel better, and the sharp smoke clears her head. Seo feels too drained and unmotivated to go outside, so she just lies back on the sofa and falls asleep again. She ends up repeating the same routine over and over, smoking again and again without really noticing the time pass. The outside view darkens as the rain keeps falling, and the sky gets even darker. She doesn't even realize how much time has gone by. In her dream, the young man from next door appears to catch her, but for some reason, she doesn't run away. It doesn't matter anymore, she thinks to herself. The rain hasn't stopped for days now, and unfortunately, she's run out of cigarettes, so she can't even get that small moment of peace anymore. Seo decides to step outside for a bit, hoping to find her neighbor, but she isn't sure if he's home. When she tries to close the door, a hand stops her. She's shocked because she didn't expect anyone to be around, especially with how quiet it has been. It's the young man she's been looking for. He leans closer to her with a smile that feels a little too confident. He must have smelled the cigarette smoke coming from her room. He's dressed for something, holding a wet umbrella, like he's just come back from somewhere, maybe work. Seo wonders if he's on his way to work now, but she only asks if he came to bring her cigarettes, because he really startled her. He ignores her question, just walks right into her room without waiting for an invitation. She asks him why he came in, and he answers casually, saying neighbors invite each other over, so it shouldn't be strange. Once inside, he glances around and notices she's been smoking all day. As he talks, she lights another cigarette, and he leans in really close, making her jump from the sudden movement. He grabs the cigarette from her hand, which she doesn't like at all. He takes a puff and, with a cold expression, tells Seo to go inside and wash up. It almost sounds like he cares. There's something about this guy, his presence is so strong that it's almost overwhelming. The young man grabs the cigarette from Seo and tells her he's just taking it for now. Seo says it's hers since he gave it to her earlier, but he corrects her, saying he didn't give it to her, he just lent it to her. He sits down with a smile on his face, waiting for her to go wash up as he asked. Seo can't help but think he looks really attractive while smoking. He tells her again to go take a shower, and while she's too tired to argue, she still complains, asking why she has to take one. She leaves anyway. In the bathroom, she looks at herself in the mirror. Her hair's a mess, greasy and sticky. She remembers what the young man had told her earlier, look in the mirror and find the answer to her question. Seo steps out of the bathroom, determined to get the cigarette, even if she feels gross. Seo isn't really concerned about how she looks right now. The young man tells her he never said she was gross. In fact, he says she's still pretty, and her looks are unaffected by how she feels, so there's nothing to worry about. He tells her again he'll give her the cigarette after she washes up, and he's not going to change his mind. Seo, not wanting to argue, decides to go ahead and take the shower. When she's done, she comes out and finds the young man sitting at the table, waiting for her. He invites her to sit down with him. There's food on the table, and he tells her to try it. Seo realizes he doesn't seem to plan on eating himself, he just wants to sit and watch her. She asks if this is part of the deal, if she has to eat before she gets the cigarette. He smiles when she asks if this is part of the deal, and says she's quick to catch on. Seo goes ahead and starts eating. The food is warm, and even though she was too tired to eat before, now her stomach feels a little better, and she feels like she has more energy. The young man sits there watching her, almost like he's admiring a piece of art in a gallery. She asks why he's staring at her, and he answers, saying it's because she's pretty, so he couldn't help himself. After finishing the meal, Seo slams her spoon down on the table and asks if he's satisfied now. She feels like she's done what he wanted, so she wants the cigarette. He hands it to her, and she takes a puff, enjoying the feeling of bliss again. It's still amazing, like nothing she's ever felt or tasted before. Watching and making his own observations, which seems a little wild. He says that if he's right, she'll probably want to do more with him too. Seo looks at him with no emotion on her face, cigar in hand, and tells him flat out that it's not going to happen. He quickly stands up when he hears her answer and walks out of her room, but not before saying, "We'll see about that," as he leaves. Seo watches him go, seeing the tall, handsome guy disappear out of sight. It all feels a little strange. He came in, cleaned her up, fed her, and then just left. Her mind keeps wondering what his deal is. She checks the door later, and finds a package outside. It's him again, leaving something for her. Every day now, he leaves cigarettes and food at her door without making a sound. It's definitely strange. What is he up to? It's obvious he's interested in her, but what does he really want? She picks up a cigarette and decides to light it. As soon as she takes a puff, a sharp pain hits her head. Suddenly, she hears a voice screaming in her head, "You're going to die." Seo falls to her knees, covering her ears, completely freaked out by the voices. No matter how hard she tries to focus on something else, the disturbing thoughts won't leave her. It's like they keep taking over her mind, and it's making her panic. In that moment, Seo's eyes light up with an idea. She realizes she needs help, and for some reason, the man next door comes to mind. He's different, a stranger with a strange way of getting involved in her life. She remembers how he acted the night he made his offer to her. Seo shakes off the panic and manages to stand up, her weak body moving toward the sofa. She hears a noise, someone's at the door. It's still raining hard outside. Seo wonders how much time has passed as she slowly wakes up in bed, the feeling of sleep still heavy on her. The young man is standing over her, looking straight into her eyes. He casually asks if she slept well, like it's a normal thing to say. Seo looks around, realizing she's been covered with his coat while she was sleeping. He explains that he came in, found her shivering, and decided to help. Seo sniffs the coat, recognizing the same refreshing scent she noticed before. He asks what she's doing, and Seo, with a hint of surprise, compliments him, saying he smells good. The young man leans in closer and asks if she's feeling all right. Seo just sits there, speechless, with innocent curiosity in her eyes. He smirks and tells her that she purposely left the door wide open, almost like she wanted him to come in. Seo tries to explain, saying he's got it all wrong. She remembers him telling her to leave the door open if she wanted to smoke. The young man quickly responds, correcting her. He says he never mentioned anything about cigarettes. What he actually said was to leave the door open if she wanted him to come in. He doesn't clarify what exactly he meant by that, and he asks her what she wants to do. Seo, feeling a bit frustrated, just says she wants everything for free. His expression changes, his demeanor darkens, and he now looks more intense. He tells her there's no way he's been giving her all these things without expecting something in return. He leans closer, casting a shadow over her, and Seo starts to tremble with fear. She doesn't feel safe at all. Overcome with fear, her body reacts with adrenaline, and she quickly runs out of the room and out of the building. She runs through the rain, her heart racing. The voices in her head echo again, telling her, "You're going to die." In the chaos, she trips and falls hard on the ground. The rain pours down, adding to the sad, heavy atmosphere. As she lies there, someone approaches slowly, the rain soaking him too. It's the guy from next door, and he covers her with his coat. He asks if she's okay. Back inside the building, Seo is sitting in a corner, still wrapped in the coat, but she's drenched and shaking from the cold. The young man tells her to wait a moment, and he starts taking off his wet shirt. She can't help but notice how good he looks, his physique impressively toned as he stands before her. He moves closer to her and turns on the heater, letting the warm air fill the room. Then, he uses the warm water to gently help her clean up, hoping it will help her feel better and warmer. Seo feels a bit embarrassed by the situation, especially since he's touching her, so he notices and takes a step back. He tries to make her feel more comfortable by saying he'll turn off the lights, so she doesn't feel awkward. He switches off the lights, then comes back to her, standing so close that their faces are almost touching. He quietly says that he'll help her take her clothes off, but Seo starts to wonder what's really going on. Is something about to happen between them? She feels uncertain and unsure of what to do next. The young man takes charge, carefully helping Seo get cleaned up with a gentle touch. She wonders how he can keep such a serious expression, almost cold like a stranger, but his actions are so tender and considerate. He pauses for a moment and touches her lips. She feels a little nervous as things seem to be moving toward a more intimate moment. She finds herself thinking back to her time in prison, where some of the other inmates believed that getting close to someone was a way to escape a difficult reality. It's a strange thought, but for some reason, Seo feels like it might not be such a bad thing after all. Being with this man has felt like a strange adventure, and for the first time in a while, she feels a bit of relief. The young man asks her what she's thinking and tells her she can speak freely. She doesn't know what to say, but something inside her urges her to act. Seo starts to think that being with this guy has helped her clear her mind. It's strange, but she begins to understand why people sometimes look for connection in this way. She even finds herself regretting not trying it out sooner. At one point, she had turned him down, not wanting to take things any further, but he backed off quietly, surprising her. Now, they are back in the living room, both dressed and sitting with cigars in their mouths. Seo starts the conversation, mentioning something she's heard before, that people realize they're alive when they feel someone else's warmth. The first time, she had felt warmth like that since being in prison was from him. The young man asks if she'd like to do this again sometime, and Seo asks him why he'd want to. He answers in a way that catches her attention, saying he's just trying to keep the gorgeous lady alive. Seo doesn't argue with that, and it's clear she's fine with it. The young man tries to keep the conversation going by asking her how she ended up in prison. The question takes Seo by surprise. She didn't expect him to ask something so personal. She explains that she was sentenced for a failed murder attempt. It's strange how they're opening up to each other now, especially after everything that's happened between them. It feels a little odd, but they're slowly getting to know one another better. Seo tells him the full story about her arrest and what led to it. She explains that she tried to harm the director of the orphanage back then. It was a strange experience for her. The feeling of holding a knife and trying to use it on someone else's body felt odd. Even though she used all her strength, things didn't go the way she thought they would. No matter how much someone might deserve death, their survival instinct is so strong that it makes them fight for their life, pushing away the blade with everything they have. Seo says it would have been better if the director had actually died. She feels strongly that it's a shame it didn't happen. The young man doesn't say anything in response to her story. Time passes, and Seo gets up from the bed, only to see her neighbor standing at the door. She asks him why he's there. He says he really thought she had died or something, and then tells her that she's been sleeping for 2 days. Seo is shocked. She wonders how he got into her apartment, because she had locked herself in. That means he must have known her front door password. The young man doesn't answer her question. Instead, he says he brought her some porridge. Seo thinks it's not too strange. Minyoung might have told him by now. She smells her clothes and realizes they're sweaty and smelly from sleeping. The first thing she decides to do is take a shower, because she feels gross. Afterward, she heads back to the bedroom and looks through Minyoung's locker for something nice to wear. She picks up a piece of underwear, and notices it has a strange shape, color, and design. The young man walks into the bedroom, as if answering her unspoken question. He tells her he couldn't sit still, that just hearing her in the bathroom was driving him crazy. Seo notices that he's not holding back anymore like he did before. He just says there's no reason for him to pretend anymore. Seo looks at him, her eyes intense, and asks him to take off his shirt. She realizes the shirt he's wearing isn't her size, and it doesn't even fit her well. They sit down to eat the meal, and he tells her the shirt actually suits her very well. He offers to roll up the sleeves for her, doing it with quick and precise movements. He then tells her to eat quickly, because he has other plans for her after the meal. At 20, Seo had never been involved with men. While in prison, the other inmates used to pity her and share stories about men. They were always angry when talking about men, saying that men only thought about one thing, sex. Seo understood that their anger probably came from wanting more, genuine love and sincerity from the men they had met. But Seo didn't long for those kinds of dreams. Instead, she found herself preferring this lighter, more carefree kind of attraction. It felt like the perfect escape from her troubles. She sets the food aside, saying she's not hungry right now. He asks if she'd like something else, but she turns him down. She gets up and moves to the couch, saying she's been full since yesterday. Seo tells him that it's actually fun to watch how her body reacts to everything. She picks up the cigarette pack from the table, takes one out, and lights it up. The young man asks how she managed to keep smoking while she was in prison. Seo explains that it wasn't really about quitting smoking, but more about holding back as a person. It's a typical answer from someone who's been smoking for a long time. He asks her how long she's been smoking to sound so experienced, and she tells him she's been smoking since middle school. The young man comments that it's clear she's been rebellious since she was young. He asks if she learned it from a boyfriend back then. Seo responds that she actually learned it from her older sister, Uni. He then asks her if she's a virgin. Seo answers with a straightforward yes. The young man is curious and lifts her up, placing her on his lap. He gently takes the cigar from her hand and tosses it away. Then, he starts to unbutton her top, and they share a quiet moment together. They get intimate and of course, he's her first. Seo wakes up in bed and sees the young man sitting there, smoking. She asks why he's not asleep. She also mentions that she wants to smoke, too. He turns around when he hears her voice and asks if he woke her up. He adds that he's curious if it's a habit of hers to mumble in her sleep, saying she sounds like a baby when she does. Seo laughs a little at that. The young man seems genuinely curious about her, and now he wants to know why she tried to hurt the director with a knife. Seo tells him that he's really curious about everything. He looks at her and says that she's actually too cute to be a murderer. Seo smiles and says he looks even better when he smiles at her. She asks him for a cigarette, but he turns her down. Seo then tells him the story about why she wanted to hurt the director. She says that the director had taken her Uni's life in cold blood, so she wanted to get back at him. The young man asks if she succeeded in getting revenge, and Seo answers that she did, but only to a certain extent. He says that she did the right thing, but wonders how she got caught. Seo explains that she's the only one who knows the director was responsible for her Uni's death. He says it's a shame she didn't manage to end the director's life. The young man joins her in bed, and it's a little cramped for both of them. He tells her she's cute, but Seo asks him to move over a bit. He asks her what she wants to do now, and they talk for a while. Then Seo asks him what he's so curious about. She tells him that if he wants, he can just be open and tell her what's on his mind. The young man says he doesn't have a specific reason for being curious, but is genuinely just interested. He points out that when someone so young picks up a knife, they must have been ready to risk everything. But now, she's back in society, and he wonders how she'll live her life from now on. Seo admits she hasn't really thought about it deeply. However, there is one thing that's always on her mind: curiosity about relationships. She says she was curious because she had never experienced it before. Now that she knows what it's like, she plans to explore more in the future. Seo says she feels lucky because there's someone who treats her kindly and makes her feel cared for. The young man says her approach to these things seems a bit distant. He tells her she doesn't seem to care much, as if it could have been with anyone, and that doesn't seem to bother her. He says she should at least say something nice in situations like this. They get intimate. They're both in bed together, and the young man asks her a question, curious about why it's so easy for her to be with him, someone she barely knows. Seo looks at him and says he seems like a nice guy, but she admits that he could be pretending, too. The young man then asks how she would feel if he were a psychopath. Seo thinks for a moment, processing the question before replying. She says that the worst thing that could happen is that she might lose her life, so it's like she doesn't really care about it. The young man isn't happy with her answer. It almost sounds like she's saying it's okay for her to die. Then, the scene shifts to the past. We see Seo as a little girl, sitting on a seesaw with another girl. The other girl asks if Seo wants to stay with her and offers her a chocolate milk drink. Seo looks at it with excitement and thirst, clearly loving it. The other girl tells her she bought it with leftover money from her school lunch. Seo takes the drink eagerly, enjoying every sip. The other girl pats Seo on the head, telling her that she thinks of Seo like a little sister, and cares about her a lot. Seo, filled with happiness, says she feels the same way, and sees the other girl as her real older sister. From that moment on, they officially accept each other as real sisters. Seo's older sister, Sung-ji, is beautiful and kind, and Seo really looks up to her. She admires her so much and dreams of growing up to be just like her. Over the years, their bond has only grown stronger. They've become more attached, and Seo now calls her Uni, a term for an older sister. After not seeing each other for a while, they finally meet up again and share a warm hug. Uni has brought some things for Seo, and Seo is amazed by the delicious food and treats spread out on the table. Unnie smiles and says she bought all of it just for her little sister, hoping she'll enjoy it and eat a lot. Even after Seoh left the orphanage and grew up into an adult, her Unnie still took great care of her. Unnie would often send her money to help out, and one day she hands Seoh an envelope with cash, saying Seoh's pocket money is all used up. Seoh, feeling curious, asks where Unnie gets the money from, wondering how she manages to make money while being a college student. She asks if Unnie works a part-time job. Unnie smiles at Seoh and says yes, she does work, because her biggest wish is to send Seoh to college. She wants to make sure Seoh doesn't have to worry about her studies or money, that she can focus on her education without any stress. Unnie says she'll take care of everything when it comes to money, and Seoh should focus on her studies. Seoh promises that she will treat her sister well when the time comes. For Seoh, all she needs is her Unnie. Her good, comfortable life is all thanks to her sister. The rain pours down heavily outside, just like it has been for days. Seoh slowly wakes up, her eyes barely open, trying to adjust to the light coming in. She hears loud knocks on her front door. It's her neighbor from next door, the man she's been seeing regularly since their night together. He's dressed sharply, like he's heading to work. He asks if she slept well, but Seoh doesn't answer. She sits up on the couch, lost in thought. In her mind, she knows why he's here. His reason is pretty clear, and the truth is, she's allowed his visits because he's always there. He pays attention to her, and that's something she's come to rely on. The man lifts Seoh up and sits down, placing her on his lap. He asks if she's had breakfast yet, but he already knows the answer. It's obvious to him, but he says it's fine. He suggests they eat together later. Seoh relaxes into his embrace, taking in his scent, and she can't help but compliment him on how good he smells. He asks if she really likes his scent that much, and Seoh smiles, saying yes. She asks what kind of perfume he uses, but he teases her, saying he won't tell her. He enjoys the way she clings to him to smell him, and he doesn't want her to stop. Seoh laughs and calls him petty. They talk a little more, and then things start to get more intimate. But halfway through, Seoh suddenly stops, saying she saw something or someone. The man shrugs it off and tells her to forget about it. They continue, but Seoh was right. Someone is indeed outside, watching. There's someone standing outside in the rain, right in front of the building. The person is wearing a hood and staring directly at Seoh's building. Seoh wonders who it could be and what they want. What does this mean for her and the young man? He holds Seoh close and gently caresses her skin. He asks her if she's hungry, but she says no. She just lies there, taking in his sweet scent. Again, he asks what she wants to eat, if there's anything special she's craving, but Seoh says she's fine. Then, he asks her what her favorite food is, wondering if it's something sweet like cake. Seoh tells him she doesn't like sweet things. She's starting to get annoyed by his constant questions. He backs off suddenly, which surprises Seoh, because it's not like him. She asks why he's pulling away so suddenly. He says he'll let her take a whiff of him after she eats. He wants to take her somewhere, and Seoh is curious about where they're going. He tells her it's a place he thinks will help her clear her head. The monsoon season has been going on for what feels like forever now, and people say it's going to last longer than usual this year. They step outside together, and Seoh realizes that this is the first time she's gone out since she got here. They walk with an umbrella, staying dry from the rain. Seoh complains that it's such a hassle, having to go out like this. She says she would have preferred just staying at home together and enjoying each other's company. The young man pulls her a little closer, and then he says something strange. He tells her that people might be like animals, but he likes to think of himself more like a plant. Seoh is confused and asks him what he's talking about. He explains that just like a plant needs sunlight and water to stay alive, she needs those things too. In his eyes, she's withering right now. Seo repeats his words back to him, saying a human being as a plant doesn't make sense. It doesn't match his identity at all. Seo isn't buying his excuse at all. She thinks he's the most animalistic person she's ever met. The young man laughs and says he'll fix what he said. She's the one who can be a plant, and he's a herbivore. Seo pulls his hands off her and tells him not to touch her in public. This is his punishment for dragging her out when she didn't want to go. He suggests they go back inside if she's not feeling it. But as they continue walking, Seo's eyes catch something on the rooftop. There's a guy in a hoodie with a face cap casting a shadow over his face, staring at them. She wonders who he is, what he wants, and if he's watching them. The young man doesn't notice and asks what's wrong. Seo points to the top of the building to show him, but when they look again, the guy is gone. Seo says she saw someone, but now they're gone. The young man says he's sure there was someone, since it's a place where people live. Seo steps closer to him, agreeing with what he said. He tells her she's being really clingy. The streets are full of people walking around with umbrellas, busy with their own lives. Seo comments that she sees a lot of couples around, so she guesses they probably look like a couple too. The young man suddenly kisses her, and Seo is shocked by it. She doesn't know how to react, and she's not happy about it. She tells him that they are in public and not alone. He replies that they have to do at least this much to look like a couple. He says he can't take it and that they should hurry up. He's almost at their destination, just across the street. They walk into a store, and an old lady behind the counter looks at them. She seems really grumpy and mean. The old lady asks if the two of them came in to eat. She looks pretty scary with her grumpy face. The young man snaps back at her, saying of course they came to eat, what else would they be here for? Seo wonders why he's being so rude to the old lady. They sit down, and the young man immediately starts asking her questions. He asks why the store is so empty, why there aren't many customers. He even asks if her business is going to shut down soon. Seo doesn't understand what his problem is with the granny. The old lady answers him, saying her business isn't dying, the lunch rush just ended. Then, Granny turns her attention to Seo. She asks if the young man came with Seo, and says that Seo looks so pale. The young man tells her it's none of her business, and tells her to just make some kimbap. The granny calls him a rude jerk, and walks into the kitchen to prepare their meal. Seo looks around the place and feels really uncomfortable. Everything here feels unfamiliar to her. She just wants to leave right away, and go back home. The young man tells her to sit down, so Seo does, sitting beside him and resting her head on his shoulder. He asks her why she's acting like this all of a sudden. Seo says she doesn't know why. He then asks her if she really didn't think she'd know better than him, and she replies that she has no idea what he's talking about. The grumpy granny finishes making the kimbap, and brings it over to their table. As she serves them, she asks if Seo is the young man's girlfriend. He quickly replies that it's none of her business, even though he adds that she has eyes, but they probably don't work as well anymore. Granny shoots back at him, calling him a jerk and joking that she hopes he doesn't pray too hard for her to go blind. She says she can still see just fine, and if she couldn't, the store probably would have been shut down by now. The young man says her eyesight will fail soon enough, making Seo wince at how harsh he sounds. She can't help but ask him why he's being so rude to the old lady. She wonders if he's close to the granny in any way. He shrugs, saying Seo isn't completely wrong, he does know the granny a little bit. Then, he leans closer to Seo, holding a piece of kimbap with his fork, and tries to feed it to her. He tells her that if she's thinking about dieting, she should forget it. In his opinion, she has a perfect figure already, so dieting wouldn't do her any good. According to him, There's nothing left to lose except her chest and butt. Seo doesn't really care, so she just shrugs. The young man asks her to imagine if his genitals shrank. He says if that happened, who would be missing out? Seo laughs and says it would be him. He disagrees, saying it wouldn't bother him at all. After all, he says, it's just a quick pee and that's it. He tells her she'll be the one missing out with something the size of a peanut. Seo looks at him, a bit confused, and asks if he's serious. Does it really shrink that much? He gently touches her lips and says she just has to imagine it in extremes to make it more fun. Seo thinks this guy is super strange. He's honestly a little creepy. He suddenly stops, pulls out his phone, and answers a call. As he walks away to talk, Seo calls after him, asking if he could answer the call here, but he says he'll be right back and steps out. Now, Seo is left alone in the store with the granny. They sit in silence for a while, neither of them saying anything. Eventually, the granny breaks the silence and tells Seo to stay away from the young man. She says he's not a good person. Seo remembers that she had been warned about him before. Her cellmate, Minyoung, had told her to stay away from him, but she didn't listen. Now, things have turned out the way they have. Seo clings to Granny's words, feeling a little thrown off. She recalls Minyoung's warning about the guy next door, a lazy womanizer with nothing to offer. Granny sounds just like her. Seo is unfazed. She knows what he's like, but only cares about what he can do for her right now. Granny's gaze makes her uneasy, so Seo says she'll be back and heads out. Granny warns her one last time about getting mixed up with someone so unlucky. As Seo walks away, she thinks about that unlucky comment, almost amused. She doesn't consider herself all that lucky, either. Her thoughts drift to the guy next door, wondering where he went without an umbrella. She strolls for a while and ends up stopping in front of a statue, staring at it. She remembers a fellow inmate talking about how they both lived in Bakadong, and describing her middle school's creepy statue at the entrance. The woman used to avoid looking at it, terrified it might make eye contact, and shared a rumor that the statue roamed the schoolyard at night. Seo remembers how much that inmate used to talk about this statue back then. Now that she's seeing it herself, she agrees, it really does look creepy. While she's staring at it, a guy in a hood suddenly grabs her hands from behind. Startled, she turns to see him smiling in a weird, almost sleazy way. He tells her she's beautiful and asks for her number. Seo is shaken, but she manages to say she doesn't have a phone. He doesn't believe her and asks again, saying it's fine if they are just friends. Before she can respond, she hears someone calling out random numbers behind the hooded guy. It's her neighbor from next door, towering over him and continuing to call out numbers in a steady voice. The guy in the hood seems intimidated, mumbles an apology, and quickly runs off. Her neighbor asks if she's okay, and Seo nods, saying she's fine and wasn't hurt. He points out that they are at a school and asks why she ended up here of all places. Seo explains, she just wandered over without any real reason. He then jokingly asks if she came out just to see him, but she brushes it off and instead asks how his phone call went. He says it was about work. Just then, 3 men in the distance start walking slowly toward them. Her neighbor notices them from the corner of his eye but stays calm and doesn't react. Instead, he suggests they go grab something good to eat. Seo laughs, reminding him they just ate not long ago, and now he's already suggesting another meal. He insists, saying she barely ate anything back at the old lady's store. They keep walking down the road together. Seo asks where they're going, and he tells her they are almost there. Soon enough, they step into a small restaurant, take their seats, and enjoy a hot meal. As they eat, he suddenly brings up a topic about sex, and Seo gives him a look, asking if he's out of his mind. While they talk, he spots the figures outside who seem to be watching them. He quickly says he's finished eating and suggests they leave. Seo can't help but think about how odd he's acting today. First, he wanted to eat, and now he's in a hurry to leave. He's so unpredictable. They start walking faster, and Seo asks why they're speeding up. He just smiles and says that walking quickly after a meal is healthy. Seo rolls her eyes, saying he's been acting strange all day. They keep moving down the rainy street, until they reach a bus stop and board a public bus. It all happens in a flash. Just as the bus is about to move, he picks her up and lifts her onto it. The driver complains that his actions were reckless. Seo is shaken, her hair is a mess, and she's completely confused. She asks him what's going on, but he just says he wanted to make sure they got on the bus together. Meanwhile, the three men who had been following them break into a run, trying to catch up, but the bus pulls away too quickly for them to reach it. One of the men sighs and tells the others to bring their car around. Another one makes a phone call, reporting that the young man boarded bus number 23 at the Barker Bank intersection. The call ends, and we're introduced to a new character, a man who's clearly angry about this news. He sneers, calling the young man a rat trying to escape. Who is this man, and what does he have to do with the guy next door? If you're eager for the next chapter, drop a comment expressing your interest in a part 2. Don't forget to subscribe and ensure to hit the notification bell to stay updated. Until next time.